Hey guys, welcome back to the Banter Bets and BPL podcast. Liam here in the dark. I was just about to sit down and record this podcast, and my power went out here. So we're up on the all hotspot, and we're going to talk about waivers and last week and how the game week went. Got the screen share up here, got the sound bites sorted out hopefully. So yeah, let's get into it. And we'll start with the Merseyside derby. By the way, this is a horrible beat for me betting for the betting portion of this podcast. Can't believe Liverpool didn't win. They were easily the better team. So it's unfortunate they didn't win off not one but 2 millimeter offside calls that were called back on VAR. That's just the worst way to lose a bet. 90th minute goal to win, and then VAR calls it back. That sucks. In any case, Mane and Salah, the goal scorers, obviously those guys are owned. Obviously their first round values. Not too much to report about there. I was going to talk about, so a lot of people picked up Thiago off waivers when he came to Liverpool, and I personally just don't think Thiago is going to be worth owning, right? Don't be fooled by the big name. Obviously he's a really good player in real life, but this is fantasy Premier League, not reality Premier League, and he just sits so deep. I don't see him getting many goals this season. I don't see him getting many assists. I'd say if you are someone who picked up Thiago early in the season, then try and trade him. Try and trade him. Find the Liverpool fan in your league. Be like, yeah, he's sick. He's a good player. He's a great player, which in reality is true. But in fantasy, he just sits way too deep to think that he's going to consistently be able to contribute assists or goals. So yeah, I'd absolutely be dropping him for a hot free agent, or trying to trade him probably before you drop him, actually. We know that the Liverpool front three are worth owning. We know that now the Liverpool back four is worth owning, minus Van Dijk, because he got hurt off a horrible challenge from Pickford that went unpunished somehow. So I think now I wouldn't bank on Matip and Gomez. Like, you're going to want to pick both of those guys up. I wouldn't be banking on them playing every game, because what I think they'll actually do is I think they'll play Fabinho at center back, who is solid. He played really well there today in the Champions League. So I think that's what they'll do. But I bet you it'll be more Gomez and Fabinho than Matip and Fabinho. But you're definitely going to want both of those guys going forward. Obviously, you already have the fullbacks. We talked about Thiago a little bit. I tend not to think any of the Liverpool midfield three are worth owning. If you're going to own one, I would much rather own Henderson. I thought he ran the show on Saturday in the game, and I just think he's the best player. He gets forward, he's box to box, he gets in the other team's box, and he's the most potent midfielder out of that group. I wouldn't have super high expectations of him, but I think he's the one to own out of that group. Speaking of, obviously Firmino is worth owning, guys, but he's just not what he used to be. The guy doesn't score many goals. It's not his role on the team to score goals. So I don't even think he's a forward one at this point. I think he's at best. Well, I think he definitely is. Like, if he's your second best forward, you're laughing. But if he's your best forward and you're relying on him to be leading your fantasy team, then he's just not. That's just not what he is, unfortunately, for Firmino moving forward. Everton, I think their front three and their back four are worth owning. Kind of the same as Liverpool to a lesser extent. Obviously, Richarlison's worth owning. He got a red card. Maybe it's a buy low if you can, but I still think he's going to have a great fantasy season. Obviously, James Rodriguez is really, really doing better than I thought he was and exceeding my expectations. The Maester, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, got the soundbite to work this time. Here it is.
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of? Exactly. Well, guess who's afraid of the Maester, Dominic Calvert-Lewin? It's Andy Robertson, who had a good game and is obviously worth owning, but Calvert-Lewin's a beast in the air. And what are you going to do? You're just going to cower down while he goes up for a header and let him score? Or are you going to make life difficult for him? Hang your head in shame, Andy Robertson. You let him have a free leap. Thought that was poor from Robertson. Obviously, he's going to be one of the best defenders in fantasy, though. The Maester, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, keeps scoring goals. Maester-Lewin. So lots of teams are going to be fearing him. He's obviously a forward one, far better than Firmino, just for comparison. And then, yeah, we talked about the Everton back four. I think Keane, Mina, Coleman if he stays fit, and Digne. Digne is the best out of those, and then probably Keane. Godfrey might be playing now. Again, Mina, he messed up on the Salah goal. I don't think he's got season-long value, but for now, while he's playing and Everton's doing well, got value for sure. Moving on to Chelsea 3, Southampton 3. Whew, boy, Chelsea can't keep the ball out of their net in the Premier League here. Start with the Chelsea backline. The two that I think are worth owning, even though they're not keeping any clean sheets, I still think this is a time to have them because it's not like teams like Chelsea, Man United guys, Spurs, you still want these top 6 defenders. Even though they're not keeping clean sheets now, guess what? They're more than likely going to finish the season in the top half of the league in terms of clean sheets. And you want to hitch your wagon to defenders for teams that are going to keep more clean sheets, obviously. That's how you come by value for defenders in fantasy prem. So in terms of Chelsea defenders that I think are definitely worth owning, I definitely want to own Zuma. I definitely want to own Bevy Ben Chilwell. Azpilicueta is probably next, and then it really seems like Thiago and Christensen are going to be splitting time. I think Thiago Silva is obviously better, but I just don't think they're going to trust his old legs with a ton of playing time for next year. So I don't like. I would probably want to own him, but just don't rely on him playing every game. Azpilicueta looks like the starting right back. Reece James is kind of a thorn in his side in terms of fantasy value. So that's just why I like Zuma and Chilwell a little better. They seem like they're more locked in as starters. Kepa played. That's hilarious. No one's touching Kepa, obviously. He was just in for Mendy, who is hurt. Mendy played in the Champions League yesterday, so that's fine. It's just funny to see Kepa forget that the soccer ball is worth touching when people are trying to score on you, and you should try and get the soccer ball instead of just, I don't know, sliding past it. So that's funny from Kepa. Obviously, you're not owning him. To be honest, guys, I think this was Chelsea's best lineup. So those guys that are playing, I think, are going to be the starters in more games than not, which is bad news for Ziyech owners and is good news for Mount owners. I just think Lampard trusts Mount. He plays him a lot. It'll be Mount, Pulisic, Werner, and Havertz, and I think that's what they're doing going forward. Speaking of Havertz and Werner, they got off the mark with their goals. Werner looked especially good. He's obviously the forward to own for Chelsea. Abraham, or as I like to call him, Abra-Scam, is not worth owning. Well, he's worth owning. He's not worth probably starting if he's not going to be playing. He might be, a high upside forward 3 that you've got on your bench in case Werner goes down or in case he starts playing a little more. Havertz, yeah, coming along strong. I like him as a midfield 2, midfield 3. He's obviously going to get plenty of opportunity. They spent a ton of money on him. He's a skilled player. He didn't start too great, but the buy low window might be slamming shut on him. Jorginho, he got an assist again. It was a really good pass, but I see him as kind of like how we spoke about Thiago with Liverpool moving forward. Good player in reality. I like how he controls the game, but he's just not going to get assists like that every week. He's not going to score penalties every week, although penalty value is valuable this season. I think he's a bit more like Thiago in the sense that he doesn't get forward enough to contribute on a regular basis. So if you want to keep him around as your 5th midfielder, sure, but I wouldn't be super loyal if he goes on a run of form where he's not scoring and assisting. I wouldn't be like, oh man, remember when Jorginho scored a penalty 5 game weeks ago? I have to hold on to him. No. And by the way, that's one of the biggest faults in fantasy is, oh man, I need to hold on to this guy because that 1 week he did good for me. No, loyalty in fantasy could be the end of you. Okay. If guys aren't performing, move them in, move them out. It's all about streaming who's hot. Unless of course they're high profile players like, well, the high profile players like the Werners, the Havertzes, Kane, all those first 4 or 5 round fantasy draft players. If not, then you just got to kind of ride the wave, guys. The league is really won and lost on waivers. That was a bit of an aside, but in terms of Southampton, I would keep an eye on Theo Walcott. Thought he looked really good. Walcott, when he moved to Everton a couple years ago, he had a bit of a new signing boost. So I know they're playing Everton this weekend, so he won't be playing. So maybe you can snag him off waivers next week. But I think he looks good, and he has been a fantasy producer in the past, Theo Walcott. So playing in a good attack with Adams and Ings, I think he might be the number one midfielder for Southampton this year, which is probably going to be fantasy relevant. Speaking of Ings and Adams, kind of in the same way that Werner broke through and scored, Adams broke through. I'd mentioned last week, maybe the patience is wearing thin for him, but it's just great for him to get his goal, get off the mark. I think he will be a solid forward 3 moving forward. The manager trusts him, keeps playing him, so I don't mind having Adams as my forward 3, not at all. Ings is a forward 1, I think, on your team. He's that good. He finishes every chance he gets almost. He scores most games. He's a fun player to own. Not a top 6 team, which is kind of or not even really a top 10 team probably, which is kind of a knock, and it kind of sucks sometimes because the team doesn't always score, but when they do, it's Danny Ings. So I'd feel good about owning Ings as a forward 1, even though he's not on one of those big 6, big 7, big 8 teams. Moving on to Man City Arsenal, pretty boring game. We didn't learn too much, guys. The Man City defenders that I am most confident in are in this order: Walker and then Diaz, and I think those are the only 2 consistent ones to start. We spoke about Mendy. He didn't play this week. He's hurt. Cancelo came in. Is Cancelo going to be worth owning? No, probably not, because he's not going to play every week. Is it going to be Ake? Is it going to be Laporte? I would think it would be Laporte, but he hasn't been playing much, and Pep loves a rotation. He spent big money on Ake. I would rather own Laporte than Ake, but at this point, we don't really know 100% who is going to be starting for them outside of Walker, and it looks like Diaz. Sterling, Aguero, Mahrez, Foden, those are the midfielders and forwards you want. Obviously, outside of De Bruyne, who missed this game. De Bruyne's obviously the best, probably, him and Sterling, the 2 best fantasy players on this team. But yeah, Mahrez, Foden, also mids worth owning. Should provide midfield 2, midfielder 3 value. I think Mahrez is better, but Foden's obviously going to be worth owning as well. In terms of Arsenal, I still think Bellerin is a great option if he's bombing forward on the right, playing in a back, not really a back 5, but he's playing right wing back. So he's more part of the midfield actually. Same with Saka on the other side. I think Saka's worth owning as a midfielder 4 or 5, even though he's kind of playing as a left wing back, left mid. He's still getting forward a lot. Had a good chance in this game. It sucks that he's not listed as a defender, because that would be super awesome, kind of like Bellerin. But Saka's still a player that I like, and I would love to own. In terms of Arsenal's defense, Tierney and Gabriel I think are the 2 you trust the most there. It looks like they'll be playing together. And then the 3rd center back slot, probably David Luiz. Do you want to trust David Luiz? I wouldn't trust him with much, but he could be the player that is a bit of a disaster in reality. But in fantasy, if he's playing for Arsenal, he's probably worth owning. Willian played again, started again. I'd prefer to own him over Pepe. Think he just has more job security. Don't love him as an option. Like, I don't really want to hitch my wagon to Willian being a huge producer, because he's always kind of been a better reality player than fantasy player and contributed more like that. But I would prefer to own him over a guy like Pepe. And obviously Willian is a player that's going to be owned and should be owned. Aubameyang has not scored yet this season, I don't believe. Maybe he's got one. I think he might have got one in the first game, but he has not started too hot. Buy low on Aubameyang, because he's going to be one of the top scoring midfielders in fantasy this season, even with the chance to be possibly the top scorer. So buy low on him. Obviously, don't sell low. You never want to sell low on anyone, but if you want to float out some, like, would you trade? I would probably even trade a guy like Calvert-Lewin, who started way faster and way hotter than you'd expect. if I had Calvert-Lewin, I'd float, take advantage of his rising stock, take advantage of Aubameyang's lower stock, and float that trade right now, okay? Because you've already got a lot of points from Calvert-Lewin. Will Calvert-Lewin continue to outscore Aubameyang from this point on to the rest of the season? I don't know. I probably prefer to own a guy like Aubameyang. So that's where you buy low, right? And that's what we talk about, riding the wave of fantasy and performers like that. So absolutely a buy low window on Aubameyang. There's not many players I would prefer to own than him in fantasy, to be honest. So big time buy low if you can use someone who started super hot like a Calvert-Lewin or someone like that. All right, moving on to this Manchester United game. My goodness, I almost had an aneurysm when they released their lineup. I was so angry. And then they got scored on like a minute and a half in with an own goal, and I almost wrote off the whole game. Yeah, I teach English to grade 4s and 5s, so that was not the best English. English is hard sometimes. Okay, back to Man U. Yeah, I can't believe that, guys. That lineup was shocking, I thought, but they came through and they won 4-1. It was a bit of a late not smash and grab, but they scored 3 goals in the 87th or later. For Man U, Rashford and Fernandes look the best fantasy options. I love both those players. They have a large spot in my heart. And yeah, I think those are the 2 best fantasy players to own. Keep sending low ball offers for Martial owners. They might be getting frustrated. He had a rough game in the Champions League. That could be playing on their mind. I still think he'll be the number 1 forward on this team to own over Cavani. In terms of defenders for United, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and Alex Telles, who looked really good in the Champions League yesterday in the big win against PSG, didn't play in this game, but they surely cannot keep playing Shaw in the Premier League and not playing Telles. They might even play both like they did this week. I think if I'm ranking Man United defenders I want to own, Telles is number 1. I'm that high on his upside. Wan-Bissaka is probably number 2 just based on job security. And then I think Maguire number 3 just based on the fact that he's not going to get dropped. And he is, despite his bad play this season and shaky play, he is the top threat for headers. Although you know how I feel about that. You don't want to bank on him scoring a header, but you'd rather own him than Lindelof because they're both going to play probably. But Maguire is just a bit more of an aerial threat. Actually, we're not quite done with that game because talking about Juan Mata, he played really well. I was a little surprised when he came in, but you know what? Maybe they should play him a little bit more often. United, you don't have to, if you're Martial, Rashford, Fernandes, even if they're having a bad game, Greenwood, Dan James, who has a lot of bad games, you don't need to just persist with these guys game after game. Throw in Mata, give him a run out once every 4 or 5 weeks, and he'll turn in a good performance. You know what you're getting from him. Having said that, I would not recommend him as a super high upside fantasy option just for that reason. He doesn't start many games, guys. He's decent when he comes in, but it's impossible to predict which games he's going to be playing. And maybe it is possible. You're just predicting him not to play very many because he doesn't. Nice player, though. Love to watch him. Him and Bruno were combining nicely. Newcastle, not much to report here. Callum Wilson, Alan St. Maximin. That's all I'm going to say. Those are the only 2 worth owning for Newcastle, I believe. On to Sunday, Sheffield United and Fulham. Come on, Sheffield. You couldn't even win this game for me. Had them in the bets. Unfortunate. Oliver Burke. I've been on him as a super buy low, super low sleeper that no one else is interested in your league probably, because he was a midfielder who was starting at forward for 3 games in a row, but he didn't even come off the bench this game. So we're giving up hope on that. It's unfortunate. I thought that could have been a steal when absolutely no one else valued him, but it looks like we're going to have to say bye-bye on that one. Unfortunate. Thought that could be one to be proud of. Having said that, I think their best forward options are going to be Brewster and McBurney. You never really know with Sheffield forwards. Those are the two I think are worth owning. The others probably not even worth owning. But even Brewster and McBurney are nothing better than forward threes at this point until proven otherwise. Outside of that for Sheffield, I like Baldock and Stevens as defenders just because they contribute a lot to the attack, not because I think they're going to be keeping many clean sheets, because that was kind of last season, and this season they do not look to be good enough. Fulham side, Mitrovic, Lookman, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I think those are the three that you look for. Outside of that, not much, guys. You don't want any defenders on that team. Even though Mitrovic had a bit of a shocker, he's the one who scores goals on this team that doesn't score many goals. So don't have super high hopes for him, but we know that Mitrovic is the goal scorer for them. Lookman's got a bit of something to prove in the Premier League. He scored, so he might be a bit of a popular pickup this week. Yeah, I don't mind him. I don't see too many Fulham players being fantasy relevant. Maybe he's the midfielder that kind of becomes the one midfielder, maybe two on this team that's fantasy relevant. So he's worth a bit of a long shot. Palace 1-1 Brighton, another boring game. Zaha looks like the man to own for Palace guys. He's playing forward, he's scoring pens, he's winning pens sometimes. He's the guy we want in that one for sure. Batshuayi played Batman. You guys know that I think he's not much of a Batman. He's more of a Robin in terms of their Crystal Palace strikers. But very funny. But yeah, I think he's more of a sidekick because I think you guys know Ayew is the man to own there. Ayew's ill. He's got an illness. Should be back soon. Always kind of chintzy when you say illness in the coronavirus time, but even if it is coronavirus, I'm sure he'll recover nicely. And I think he's the forward to own over Batshuayi. Batshuayi looks like a spot start guy, nothing more. What else we got? No Eberechi Eze, no party. He didn't play. They're playing guys like Schlupp and Townsend and not exciting fantasy options over him, which is unfortunate. Do I think Eze has a route to fantasy relevance this season? Absolutely. The minute he starts popping off, guys, pick him up. He's a watch list guy for sure. Don't know if he's worth owning right now, but watch list guy, absolutely. What else we got here? Townsend, like he was producing a bit. Are you ever going to be excited about owning Andros Townsend? No, you're not. If you want to hold him, sure, but there's just more exciting mids to take flyers on, I believe. Sorry if you're hearing a bit of noise. My dog is going crazy here in the living room with the power out. But so if you hear any crashing, it's probably her running into something because she can't see. What else we got for this game? Hopefully not much more. Oh yeah, we'll just do Brighton quickly. Mopai, Trossard, and Lamptey in that order are the guys I like in that team. I also like Connolly. He didn't play this week, or he didn't start this week. He obviously came off the bench, got an assist. So those are the four that I think are fantasy relevant on this team. Love Trossard, always will. Spurs 3, West Ham 3, another cracking match. In terms of Spurs, it really is the Harry Kane and Heung-min Son show. The Kane and Son show. These guys are they're looking like fantasy superstars, fantasy studs this year, guys. Shout out to my league for letting me draft Kane 12th overall. Thank you guys for that. But yeah, these guys are looking awesome, and they're really the only attackers outside of Bale, who we did see an appearance from, who I think obviously will be worth owning. But those are the two guys worth owning, and then Bale probably he will be worth owning, but Kane and Son seem to be cut above them, I think. Reguilon got an assist. He looks like the Spurs defender that I most want to own. It's not a long list because you don't really know who's going to play. Soundbite time, actually, because the night Serge Aurier played again.
As for me, I'll be a knight.
All right, love that soundbite. But yeah, the night played again. Looks like he might have Doherty's place at right back. I for one prefer Doherty as in terms of who's a better player, but if the Knight is playing, then the Knight is the guy you want to own. It's just that simple. The Spurs right back slot and the Spurs fullback slots are fantasy relevant just because they will produce a bit of offense, and hopefully they actually put some clean sheets together. Outside of that, I probably still want to own Davinson Sanchez in the center backs, but it looks like him, Dyer, and Alderweireld, it's going to be tough to predict who's starting week in, week out. So that could be a bit of a fantasy headache. So in terms of West Ham, if you'd have told me going into the week that West Ham would score 3 goals and my boys, Jared Bowen and Mikel Antonio, would not be scoring or assisting any of the 3, I would have told you to shut the front door probably. Lanzini with an absolute screamer, Balbuena, own goal, Cresswell, Kufal, look, these guys definitely aren't worth owning. Cresswell, I think, is a nice, fun streamer for when West Ham has a decent matchup, but you can't be relying on him to get assists every week, unfortunately. He's a West Ham defender. He's fun right now, won't be probably fun when he stops getting the assists and they're getting smacked, 5-0 against Man City, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. The guys who scored for West Ham aren't fantasy relevant, I'm sorry. Unless Lanzini somehow turns it around and becomes a stud, but just not fantasy relevant pour moi. Villa 1-0 Leicester. Villa to win the league. Aston Villa have 3 fantasy relevant players, I believe, and somehow they're in second in the league, 12 points from 12. Obviously, that doesn't mean that they're going to be that way the whole season. So I think this season they have Watkins, Grealish, and Barkley, who are fantasy relevant. McGinn maybe as a 5th midfielder, probably a streamer. You're going to want to ride him when he's hot, drop him when he's not, like we talked about in your 5th midfielder slot. That's something you should be doing. You probably aren't going to have 5 midfielders that you're holding the whole season, guys. Sorry to break it to you, but no one has that good of a draft. So yeah, Watkins, Grealish, Barkley. It might be time to start picking up some Villa defenders. Maybe they're the mid-table team that is top half this season and is worth owning for some defenders that get clean sheets. A la Sheffield United last season, a la Burnley last season. There's always that one team that starts putting together a bit of a run and you want to take advantage of those options. So that's Matty Cash, Matty Target, Ezri Konza, Tyrone Mings. And then their goalie Martinez is obviously should be owned as a goalie already, but maybe you start to see if one of those defenders is available. They got Leeds at home this weekend. I'd be surprised if they kept a clean sheet, but crazier things have happened, right? So maybe you want to get ahead of the curve with Villa defenders this week. Obviously, I got more on that. I didn't even talk about Leicester. Leicester, I think they'll be a better team than Villa despite this game. I think they'll have more fantasy relevant players. Their back 4 is fantasy relevant. Fofana is a cheeky ad, just because it looks like he'll be playing with Soyuncu out for a while. Evans is worth owning. Justin and Castagna worth owning until Pereira actually makes his comeback. In terms of attacking options, I think the most consistent ones that you're going to want to own all year are Harvey Barnes and Jamie Vardy. The other ones, they don't like if Madison gets a consistent run in a team, obviously he's worth owning. Same could probably be said for Perez and Pratt, maybe if they play under, but those guys are less likely to be getting consistent runs. The reason Barnes and Vardy, Barnes and Noble. Now Barnes and Vardy are worth owning and are the most reliable is because they play the most reliable amount of minutes. Those are the first 2 team names on the team sheet in terms of attacking players. I should say I forgot about Tielemans. Tielemans is probably the 3rd most I'm most confident in of producing value this season. But I definitely want Vardy and Barnes before them. And then the other ones you're looking to see if they have a run in the team and ride them while they're hot. Guys like Madison, Pratt, stuff like that. Oh, what a game we got here. Okay, I'm going to spend about 30 seconds on this game. Own Mateus Pereira, own Chris Wood, maybe own Ashley Barnes now that he's back. Don't own anyone else on these teams except for their goalies, as we can see, because they're not good and they don't do anything. That's all we're going to say on that. Wolves 1-0 over Leeds. Good win for Wolves. Had a bit of a rough start. Jimenez, the man with the plan and the skills to pay the bills. The big goal, big win.
Yeah, Jimenez is obviously a forward one. Outside of that, they got Padence and Neto, who look like they're going to be the starting wingers. And I do want a piece of the starting wingers on Wolves, which means I want a piece of Neto and Padence. Disappointing season so far from our man, Adama Traore. You got to think he's going to start playing soon, which qualifies him as, ding, 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 you guessed it, buy low candidate. The owner of Traore is probably getting a bit of sick and tired of him coming off the bench. You got to think he's going to start over Neto or Padence eventually. So I would love to, I love the idea of buying low on Traore. Outside of that, the Wolves, this Max Kilman guy might have some fantasy value. Looks like he's playing. I don't really see him playing over Marçal, I'm not sure how to say that one, but the left back they brought in from Lyon. Don't see Kilman playing over him for the whole season, which makes Marçal maybe a bit of a buy low option, but ride Kilman while he's playing. Don't bank on him playing all season, but guys you can bank on playing all season: Cody, Bolly, Saiss, Semedo. You obviously want to own all those guys, as it is with Wolves. Own their attackers, own their defenders, don't own their midfield. They're just another one of those teams. In terms of leads, Patrick Bamford, the chosen one.
I am the chosen one.
Yes, he is the chosen one. Another great Harry Potter soundbite there. Yeah, I still love Patrick Bamford. He didn't score. No one scored for Leeds, but he's the man to own. Rodrigo played, so if you're a Rodrigo owner, maybe you're a little bit happy. You're still not happy because you probably drafted him way ahead of when you should have, and Bamford was definitely on the table when you drafted Rodrigo. But yeah, Bamford's still the chosen one. Jack Harrison came back and played. He's the midfielder I want to own most on that team. Click. Costa might be nice for the rest of the season. I'm not 100% sure. They signed this Rafinha guy. They've got that Pavetta guy. They've got a lot of attacking mid options leads, so I'm not 100% sure on job security for a lot of them. The one I'm most confident in is Harrison for sure. In terms of their defenders, they don't really keep clean sheets leads. If you want Ayling or Dallas because they get forward a bit, then maybe they're worth streaming, especially in good matchups. Don't think they'll be worth owning all season. But ride them while they're hot, like we always say. Ride them till the wheels fall off. Yeah, that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm about to jump on a fantasy draft myself. We had to make it work this week without power. Sitting here in the dark, but yeah, make sure you get those waivers in, guys. Like we always say, fantasy leagues are won and lost on waivers. So don't be the guy that loses the league. Peace out. We'll be back tomorrow with the betting podcast.